Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to my video on hiding and unhiding columns using Excel VBA UserForm. So oftentimes in counseling research, as we are taking a look at our data, we want the ability to hide and unhide columns relatively quickly, depending on what elements of the data that we're examining at a particular moment. So you can see I have these data, and these are fictitious data, in this worksheet, and I have an ID number, and there are 20 participants here, and a gender, and we'll say that 0 is coded to male and 1 is coded to female. Then age, and that would be in years, and say we're looking at two different program types, 0 and 1. You could say 0 could be coded to a bachelor's level program and 1 to a master's level. And then of course you have GPA, a pretest score, aptitude test, and final exam. So depending on what our focus is at a particular time, we're going to want to view different variables. Now again, with just 8 variables, it might not be particularly difficult just to leave them up no matter what we're looking at. But when you get into more variables, data can become cumbersome. So I have a user form activated by this blue rectangle here, and I'll show you how I constructed this, that'll hide and unhide columns using toggle buttons. So for example, if I just really wanted to see the ID and then the scores here, but not the gender, age, or program, I could press gender, age, and program, and it would hide those particular columns for me, which makes this a lot easier to view if those aren't the focus. Or I could, of course, unhide them just by clicking the toggle button again. So toggle button has two states, true or false. In this case, when the toggle button is set to false, you can see the column, and set to true, you won't be able to see it. So let's say that we hide just program, for instance, and we close the user form. We want the user form to know that program is hidden when it restarts. So we want that toggle button to display as depressed or in the true state when we open up the user form, and indeed it does. And of course, if I click the program toggle button again and return it to the false state, the variable program will be visible again. So let's take a look at how this was coded. So first I have this rectangle that I inserted here. So it's insert shapes. I just chose rectangle and then put it on there and had it set as blue. And then clicking Alt F11 will bring us to the code view. And I'm going to want to go to Sheet 1 Data and create this subroutine. This is just sub open user form 1, and the only line of code in the subroutine is userform1.show. That's it. So going back to the worksheet, I would just assign macro and select open user form 1, hit OK, and that's what allows me to bring up this user form like this. So going back to the code view, I'm going to close this, and I'm going to minimize this here. So this is the user form I started with, and what I did here is I clicked Insert and User Form, and then using the toolbox I dragged a toggle button on. Right now it was toggle button 1 originally, and then I just copy and pasted and created 8 toggle buttons because I have 8 columns. I also changed the default font to Times New Roman 12, and I changed the back color of the user form to a dark blue. Additionally, because I copy and pasted, even though this is toggle button 1, as you can see from the name, and this is toggle button 2, the caption remains at toggle button 1 for all of them. So just to make this a little more clear, I changed the caption to match the name of the control. So You can see the toggle button 1, 2, 3, all of these caption names over here match the actual name of the control. So now let's take a look at the code. I'm going to delete 3 of these subroutines and reconstruct them, but I'm not going to delete and reconstruct the toggle button 2 through toggle button 8 because those subroutines are identical to the subroutine for toggle button 1 except for one change, and I'll show you what that is. So I'm going to start by deleting this subroutine hide column, and then I'm also going to delete toggle button 1 click, so I'll take those out, and at the end the initialize subroutine, I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to build them from the beginning, and then I'll show you how to make the change for the remaining toggle buttons. So first we're going to want a subroutine that we can call that will hide and unhide the column. So I'm just going to call that sub hide column, even though it does unhide them as well. And it's going to have one argument, which is C, and that's going to be an integer. Alright, so you can see sub hide column, C is integer. And then I'm going to start off with an if statement. So it's going to be if controls, and then quotation mark, toggle button, close quotation mark, and, which ampersand, C equals true, then, and I'm going to put end if in here before I continue on. Now I'm going to put the code in that will be activated if the controls toggle button C is true. So let's take a look at this for a second. So what this is doing is it's taking the toggle button and then the integer C, which will be 1 through 8, and it's saying if it's true, so if it's pressed down, then this code will run. I'm going to put in here. And in this case, I'm going to want the column that corresponds with the value of C to be hidden. So if this is toggle button 4 that's coming through, so C is 4, this will be toggle button 4, I'm going to want column 4 to be hidden. So the way we do this is columns C hidden equals true. And then for the else statement, so if controls toggle button, in this case 4, is equal to false, I'm going to want the hidden property to be false instead of true. Columns C hidden equals false. So that column will not be hidden. And there's one other element I want to add to this subroutine hide column, and that is active window scroll column equals 1. Now this doesn't have to be in here, but this is useful because as you hide and unhide columns using the user form, it's going to change the value of scroll column. So it's going to scroll the worksheet from left to right, and active window scroll column equals 1 sets it all the way back to the left, so back to the beginning, so you can see column A. So now I can put the code in for toggle button 1, and what I would do for that is I'm just going to double click toggle button 1. And in this case, this is very straightforward. I'm going to declare C as an integer. I'm going to set C's value, in this case, to 1. And then I'm going to call hide column. Notice I don't have to use the capital C here. It's going to reset that for me when I hit enter. So you have C as an integer. I set the value C to 1, and then I'm calling hide column with that value. So you can see when this is called, this is going to be toggle button 1 and column 1. And the procedure is repeated for toggle buttons 2 through 8. And you can see I already have that done here. So for toggle button 2, the only thing that's changed here is now you set the value C to 2. For 3, you set to 3, and so on. I did that for all the toggle buttons. So now we have the toggle buttons working, but we still don't have the initialize set up. And the initialize is important because it resets the captions. Otherwise, the captions are going to look like this when you open the user form, and you want the names of the variables to be in here, not toggle button 1, toggle button 2, and so on. And it also checks to see which columns are hidden and which ones aren't, and sets the toggle buttons to the correct state, true or false. So for the initialize, I'm just going to double click on the actual user form, but then instead of click, I'm going to change this to initialize, and I'm just going to delete this user form click. So this is set up correctly, user form initialize, and let's take a look at the code that we're going to need here. So first I'm going to start with declaring I as an integer. We'll use that in the next line, which is for I equals, in this case, 1 to 8. And I'm choosing those values because I have 8 variables. And again, before I go any further, I'm going to put next I. This is a loop, so I want to make sure I close the loop with the next I before I put the code in. So the first thing we're going to want to do with this loop is to set the captions of all the toggle buttons to match the value in the first cell of each column, or the name of the variable. And you could do this one by one. It doesn't have to be in a loop. You could set toggle button 1 to be equal to, in this case, the ID, but that would take a while. It's easier to use a loop here and just loop through 8 times. And the way we do this is controls and then toggle button in quotes, then ampersand, and then I. So this will loop through all the toggle buttons, and I want the caption to change. So controls, toggle button, and I dot caption. And then we're going to make that equal to cells, row 1, and then the column will be I. So if this were the first time the loop is running, this would be toggle button 1, and the caption would be equal to cells 1, 1, which would be ID. So that takes care of resetting the captions. The last part is we want to check to see if a column is hidden, and if it is, we want the toggle button to be set to the true state, or press down. And we'll just use an if statement for this, so it'll be if columns, that's plural, I, hidden equals true, then, and again I'm going to put end if here before I put the code in the middle, and the only line of code here is going to be controls toggle button in quotes ampersand I. In this case, it's not going to be the caption we're going to be changing, but the value. So it's dot value equals true. So that's our initialize subroutine for this user form. So I had deleted this subroutine and these first two and reconstructed them. So let's see if I did it correctly, if it's going to work as intended. So I'm going to open the user form up, and you can see the 8 variables. You can see it did populate them correctly. If I hide program, it's hidden, and the GPA and pretest, if I hide them, they're hidden. That seems to be working. Let's say I hide age and I leave that hidden and I close this and then reopen. Is it going to show that? And it does. That's shown as pressed down. If I click it again, age appears. And I also want to test to make sure if I make a change, like say this shows pretest, let's say this is really post-test. So we change the name of the variable. I want to make sure that when I open the subroutine, that's going to be reflected, and you can see it is, and I can hide and unhide that variable. I hope you found this video on hiding and unhiding columns using an Excel VBA UserForm to be helpful. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to contact me, and I'll be happy to assist you.